Good afternoon from Capital on Park Hotel in the heart of Sandton, South Africa's financial district. We are on day 4 of interviews for the vacant position of Chief Justice. A much more subdued Friday morning than compared to what we had yesterday with the vindictive drama around Judge President Dunstan Mlambo. I'm joined by Karyn Maughan, News24's senior legal reporter. Karyn, it's overcast today, not as boiling hot as it was yesterday, and it seems like the temperature in that interview room is different than it was yesterday.
I think that you are dealing with a very, very different individual when you talk about Deputy Chief Justice, Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. And you know, as you and I have discussed off camera, this is someone who, for the best part of 4 years, has spent hours, days, weeks, months listening to a barrage of disparate characters try to defend their allegedly corrupt activities.
Disparate and desperate.
But has had all kinds of attacks leveled against him, has, been dragged through, the courts, has those extraordinary application last year for the contempt against the former president. So really, I think that in comparison to some of those things, Zondo can handle anything, and he certainly is proving that.
Yeah.
I mean, any kind of questioning that any normal person would get very hot under the collar about, he's just like, let me explain.
In that very heavy baritone voice of his.
Yeah.
Karyn, so we started just after 9. He gave his vision, like the other candidates did, of the judiciary, of the office of the Chief Justice. He also spoke about the independence of the judiciary, which has been a theme for the whole week. But the morning's questioning, once it started about an hour, 40 minutes to an hour after the proceedings began, was more administrative, legal, technical here and there. It hasn't been as contentious and as political as yesterday. It might still come, but there still were a couple of snags here and there. First up was questioning around his supposed bias in favor of President Ramaphosa. How did he handle that?
No, I think, it is something that came up in the questioning of Judge President Dunstan Mlambo. It is clearly a theme from a certain faction within the JSE, and they are going to push it. There is a highly politicized environment around this, which I think may reach further fruition later this afternoon. But I think that arguably there is with what happened with Dunstan and Mlambo yesterday, which was completely unacceptable, there has been somewhat of a subdued pullback. We do see Julius Malema coming to the fore, as he usually does, that extraordinary sort of shouting match incident with Petse. But I think that there is an awareness from the JSC, certainly there has to be, that if they continue in the vein that they went with the Mlambo, they are really threatened with a massive credibility crisis, where the ordinary South African is just saying, why the hell are you doing this job?
Karyn, has that not already happened? I mean, yesterday, and refresh the viewers' minds, there was a court challenge last year after the interviews in October, I think it was, for vacant positions on the bench of the High Court. What happened in that instance? What followed that? And don't you think that the credibility of the JSC has already been dealt a fatal blow?
I think it has. I think what happened in April 2021 was, of course, the Constitutional Court vacancy interviews that happened. Those absolutely unacceptable treatment of Judge Pillay, who was lambasted and accused of being a political activist, amongst other things, by Malema. Unfortunately, the then Chief Justice Mogoeng entering into the fray, suggesting that Pravin Gordhan, the minister with whom she had a friendship that dated back to apartheid, had made, sort of inappropriate overtures, and sort of asked how she had done in the interview. Gordhan, of course, we know, coming out and denying it, and Mogoeng not refuting his version of the events, which was that the entire engagement was completely innocent and took part as part of another engagement. But it gets worse, because CASAC then launches litigation to challenge that process, and it emerges that the entire JSC did not debate or deliberate on the suitability of the candidates who should be on that shortlist, but simply accepted the shortlist that was prepared for them by Chief Justice Mogoeng, who chose not in one instance to justify substantively why he did not feel that Pillay, who came under attack for her decision to issue a suspended arrest warrant against Jacob Zuma for his failure to appear at his contempt case, and came under attack for finding in favor of Derek Hanekom when he sued Jacob Zuma for defamation, a ruling, of course, that Zuma failed to appeal in the Con Court and the SCA. That Mogoeng chose not to explain why he felt that she was not a suitable candidate. The very same woman who was actually sharing a bench with him at the Con Court. So, a very clear scene being painted of an institution that is fundamentally politicized, fundamentally about settling political scores. That perception, of course, was only reinforced by what happened to Dunstan and Mlambo yesterday, given his role as the judge president of the Pretoria High Court, which deals with these contentious matters, dealing with the fact that we had extraordinary, unsubstantiated rumors. They weren't even put on their level of allegations being made about him being a sexual harasser.
There was simply nothing. There was nothing there.
Absolutely nothing. Of course, we know that the record was expunged. And now we have this situation where ACJ Raymond Zondo is being questioned about a report that it has just 2 parts have been delivered. But the parts that he was being most vociferously questioned about related to the SSA, which is an issue that he hasn't even made findings on.
Which is very odd, and I want to get to that a little bit later. Just to stick with the JSC as an institution, you've been covering this for a number of years. Can you recall, or can you pinpoint the moment or a period of time where the JSC went from a body which interviewed prospective candidates for the bench on the basis of legal matters and legal issues and legal debates to one where it's almost purely a political process, purely a political event like we saw yesterday? Was there a period where the JSC actually functioned as the framers of the Constitution envisioned it to do?
Absolutely, and if you speak to legal journalists and people, like Stephen Curtis and others, even Adrian Besson, who were part of covering those JSC processes, over a decade ago, there was a decorum, there was a keeping to time. When Dikgang Moseneke was chairing the JSC, people got their time, they kept to their time, and there was a respect showed to each and every candidate. You can ask people tough questions, but you can ask those questions in an informed, measured and appropriate way. I would refer back now to Julius Malema, the president, acting president of the SCA, asking him please to moderate his tone and not shout at Zondo.
There's a visible antagonism towards the candidates.
And then Malema starting to scream back at Petse. And Petse withdrawing completely. I mean,
he shriveled in the face of Malema's response.
If that had ever happened with Dikgang Moseneke, I mean, it wouldn't have happened.
But you used the word respect, and it, my impression of this whole week's proceedings has been that there's been a complete lack of respect from the commissioners towards the candidates. I mean, these are senior jurists, judges who've served on the bench for many years, who've proven their mettle, who are respected in their field of expertise. And some of these commissioners just are completely dismissive of these individuals in front of them.
Well, they're dismissive of them on very factional political lines. And I'll tell you one of the examples that I give you. The same people that attack DCJ Raymond Zondo for coming out in the face of extraordinarily problematic comments from the tourism minister, Lindiwe Sisulu, essentially saying that, what was the Constitution useful for, attacking rule of law and saying whose rule of law is it anyway? And then this I don't even know how to phrase this, how terrible this was, saying that black judges on the bench, some of whom have made extraordinarily brave decisions. We hear yesterday that Judge Elias Matajane, who ruled that the medical parole granted to Jacob Zuma was invalid, being threatened with his life to such a degree that he wanted Mlambo to issue a press statement, that they are somehow comparable to quote-unquote house Negroes. We see this extraordinary attack on Zondo for holding a press conference and saying, this is not acceptable, this is not okay, this critique is fundamentally problematic, and we would hope that she would retract it and apologize, which he was perfectly within his rights to do. This attack on him But somehow, when Judge President John Klope goes and calls, makes all these kind of statements about Pius Langa, Dekhan Moseneke, Besan Kabinde, Dunstan Mlambo, Sisi Kampepe, and a host of others, that somehow is acceptable, and that he goes in public forums on TV stations and talks about the fact that he should be the next Chief Justice of the country in circumstances where there have been multiple claims of misconduct made against him, a gross misconduct finding made against him that he's now trying to challenge, that somehow that's different, that's acceptable. And the fundamental threat here, Pieter, is that there's no consistency. It's just that, the people on the side of that particular faction of the judiciary believe they have the right to say anything they want to, but none of the judges on the other side are allowed to respond to it.
Look, it's clear political grandstanding.
Absolutely.
But to pick up on a point that you made just now, so Zondo was asked about his response to Lindiwe Sisulu's horrible opinion piece that she published in the Unaccountable Independent newspaper group. He did hold a press conference. He stood up for the independence of the judiciary. I'd argue that's what you want. That's what you want from a Chief Justice. And it was put to him by one of the commissioners this morning that it might have somehow been appropriate, that it indicates the judiciary venturing into a space that they should not venture into. And he stuck to his guns, didn't he, Karyn? He said he disagrees with the commission, and that's exactly, he would do it again.
And I think it was, this is typical Zondo. He says, I did think about issuing a press statement, but then I kind of ran out of time. And I hadn't got to it because we were part 2 of the report. So I just thought, let me have a press conference, adjure this issue that I feel that this is insulting and why. And we of course heard from Dunstan and Mlambo yesterday that this was something that involved consultation with all the judges, that they were all made aware of it, that they were trying to craft this statement, but time ran out. And Zondo decided, look, I need to do something.
Bite the bullet and let me do what I need to do.
And then, of course, again, this is Commissioner Notiesi raising this issue of, why did you have a press conference after the infamous Dali Mpofu telling Michelle Leroux, the advocate, to shut up, telling Pravin Gordhan to shut up during that hearing. He is now, of course, the LPC, Legal Practice Council, has found that there's a basis for him to be investigated for professional misconduct.
Commissioner on the JSC.
Yes, which is a whole other question that we could get into. But saying to Zondo, why did you have a press conference? And Zondo saying, I didn't have a press conference. I responded to it in the inquiry 2 days after it happened, said it was not acceptable. Didn't take the matter further. But, this kind of suggestion, which we've seen threaded through a number of the questions, that Zondo is somehow media friendly and holding press conferences at every available opportunity, and, problematically so, is something that's going to come out. Never mind the fact that, CJ Mogoeng did the exact same thing during the Zuma administration.
It's interesting that actions or events, part of his normal day job, or part of his job as head of the inquiry into state capture, was somehow made to be, by some commissioners, somehow tried to make it as if there's something nefarious about it. I mean, Malema spoke of him briefing the president, updating the president on the progress of the commission, and making it out as if there was something wrong or nefarious with the Deputy Chief Justice speaking to the president. So you're right, there is this thread of undermining everything that Zondo did, or at least, try to cast a pall over it.
And then you see this horrifically ironic comment from Notiesi, the kind of undermining of the independence of the judiciary is the fault of the judiciary. That is the most profound victim blaming I've ever heard. And many of the people who are sitting in that room across there are directly responsible. Malema is one of the worst offenders, but I would argue Dali Mpofu is also guilty in some of his conducts and remarks in court hearings that I've sat through, where the bona fides of female judges are questioned. Who are the male politicians that are controlling them? Of course, when judges ruled against the public protector in relation to CR17 and Pravin Gordhan SARS unit, those judgments, of course, Mandisa Maya finding that there was no basis for them to be reconsidered a few days ago, even up to this week.
Furiously attacked when those judgments were given.
Furiously attacked. But, it's fine for those very same people to turn around and say, well, actually, as a judiciary, you're you're responsible for your credibility being undermined, and you're responsible for your independence being compromised, but taking absolutely no responsibility for the very prominent role that they have played in undermining the judiciary.
Karyn, so the three big issues this morning, I suppose, were, he also spoke about threats against himself, against his family.
Yes.
He spoke very passionately, and I thought very eloquently, and it gave me a tear in my eye about how he was appointed as head of the commission. Saying that he knew it was going to be difficult, he knew it was going to be tough, he expected that he would make enemies, but if he was to be asked to do it again, he'd do it in a heartbeat. What did you make of that? I mean, I thought it was just so emblematic of someone that knew there was a difficult job to do, and he took it upon himself on behalf of the nation, really.
As we came out here to go and do this interview, a group of university students, I think they were outside, as he walked past, began singing, chanting his name, clapping. And I think that, that's the point, is that he's a fundamentally humble man. When he started his interview this morning, he said, I don't expect as the Deputy Chief Justice or the Acting Chief Justice to get this job. I don't come in with this expectation. If I'm honored, I am honored to be here. I'm honored to be on this list. But fundamentally, he said throughout his interview that he's here to serve this country. One of the details that came out this morning or later today was that he, was basically tasked by Mogoeng to find a judge to chair the inquiry.
And no one wanted to do it.
And no one wanted to do it. And I mean, having seen what we've seen over the last few years, it's not hard to imagine why. But that eventually, when he realized that Mogoeng was likely to ask him, he became aware of what is he going to say. And he said, I didn't hesitate. And now in a circumstance where he has disclosed to the commission that his life has been threatened, we know from the bodyguards that walk around him all the time that he has 24-hour protection. We know that he did not disclose his address because, among some of the other things that happened during this inquiry, pictures of his house in Tembeka and Guatobi at the time walking into it were leaked on social media. We know that a bullet was fired through the office window of the commission. We know that a number of the evidence leaders, Paul Pretorius and others, have got
break-ins and all the rest of it.
They've got protection. So, this is not child's play. And in the circumstances where that is happening, where people's lives have literally been threatened, where his family actually doesn't stay in the same province as he does to protect them, for the kind of comments to be leveled against him and for him to remain cool and calm and collected the way he does speaks to the character of the man. And I think, whether he gets this job or he doesn't, he has done a great service to this country. And the people who were clapping outside acknowledge that.
And he's kept a good sense of humor, and he has not yet been intimidated today. Karyn Maughan, thank you so much. Follow News24's coverage of the rest of the interviews for Chief Justice, as well as the deliberations, which are sure to follow throughout the course of the day and the rest of the week. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.